Tonight, we're telling the history of the Cherokee people, not the simplified version you learned in school, the one that jumps from "they lived here" to "trail of tears" to "sad ending." The real story. The one where a man who couldn't read invented a complete writing system that his entire nation learned in months, where they built a government so sophisticated it had newspapers, a Supreme Court, and higher literacy rates than their white neighbors, where they won the biggest legal victory possible. And it didn't matter. Where they were forced to walk 1,000 miles in winter and 4,000 people died. But the survivors carried seeds in their pockets and stories in their memory because they knew something about what can and can't be destroyed. This is Cherokee history. The whole story. The brilliant adaptations. The impossible choices. The legal victory that should have changed everything. The betrayal that came anyway. And how they survived all of these. How they're still here 2 centuries later, resilient and determined. But to understand how they survived what should have ended them, how they knew what to save and how to save it, you need to see what they built in the first place. Because the systems they created, the way they organized power, the things they valued, those weren't random. Those were the reasons they made it through. So we're going back to the southern Appalachians, to the mountains and river valleys, to see who the Cherokee actually were, what they created, how they lived. Because that world, the one that existed for centuries before everything changed, that's where this story really starts. When the Cherokee called themselves Ani-Yunwia, the principal people. And by the time Europeans showed up with their opinions about civilization, the Cherokee had been running a sophisticated society in the southern Appalachians for at least 1,000 years. Their origin stories don't say they came from somewhere else. They say they've always been here, emerged from the mountains themselves. Anthropologists argue about migrations from the Great Lakes or from Texas, but the Cherokee memory goes back to these specific mountains, these specific river valleys. By 1000 AD, they were living in permanent towns, not wandering camps, towns. Some had 200 people, 300, even more. They built wattle and daub houses, circular frames woven with branches and plastered with mud, partially sunken into the ground for insulation. Efficient, durable, designed for the climate. At the center of every town stood the council house. These weren't just big rooms. These buildings could hold 500 people for meetings, ceremonies, gatherings. Inside burned a sacred fire, kept alive continuously. Let it go out and you'd broken something fundamental in the order of things. The society was organized around 7 clans: bird, deer, wolf, paint, wild potato, long hair, and blue. You were born into your mother's clan, and that determined almost everything about your place in the world. Who you could marry, who you were obligated to help, where you fit in the social structure. You couldn't marry someone from your own clan. That would be like marrying a sibling. But the system created something remarkable. These clans crossed town boundaries. A member of the Wolf clan in one village was your clan brother if you were Wolf clan too, even if you'd never met before. Instant kinship, instant obligation. Travel 200 miles to a town you'd never seen, and you'd find family there. People who had to take you in, feed you, protect you. It was a social safety net built into identity itself. The matrilineal structure would have shocked European observers. When a Cherokee man married, he moved into his wife's house, not the other way around. She owned the house, she owned the fields, she owned the harvest. The children belonged to her clan, not his. If the marriage fell apart, he left, back to his mother's house with whatever he'd brought. The house stayed hers. The children stayed hers. The fields she'd planted stayed hers. This wasn't some progressive exception. This was how society was structured. Property and kinship flowed through women. Men had authority in other domains, warfare, hunting, certain ceremonies. But the foundation of Cherokee society rested in the hands of mothers and grandmothers. They were farming with a level of sophistication that most Europeans didn't recognize. The Three Sisters method: corn, beans, and squash, planted together in an engineered system that modern agronomists still admire. The corn grew tall, providing structure. Bean vines climbed the stalks, and their roots fixed nitrogen in the soil, fertilizing everything around them. Squash spread across the ground between the mounds, its broad leaves shading out weeds and holding moisture in the soil. It was elegant. It was self-sustaining. And it produced more food per acre than most European farming techniques of the same era. They weren't just farmers, though. They hunted deer, bear, elk, turkey. They fished in rivers thick with fish. They gathered wild plants, roots, greens, nuts, berries. But agriculture was the foundation. It meant surplus. It meant they could stay in one place and build permanent towns. It meant they could support populations large enough to develop specialized skills, complex governance, rich cultural traditions. The Cherokee were connected to trade networks that stretched across half the continent. Shells from the Gulf Coast, copper from the Great Lakes, mica from the Carolinas. Walk into a Cherokee town in 1500 and you'd see objects that had traveled 1,000 miles to get there. Their government was more sophisticated than Europeans gave them credit for. Every town had two chiefs, a white chief and a red chief. Peace and war. The white chief handled everything during peacetime. Diplomacy, trade, settling disputes, organizing the Green Corn Festival. The white organization was run by elders who'd proven their wisdom over decades. When war came, power shifted to the red chief. Younger, tested in battle, organized for violence. The red organization took over. Different council, different rules, different priorities. The genius was in the flexibility. The people who were good at building consensus didn't have to be good at leading raids. The people who were fierce in battle didn't have to be patient diplomats. Each system had its place. Each had its time. The society could flip between states without tearing itself apart. Women sat on the war councils, not as decoration, as counselors with actual authority. They regulated the treatment of prisoners. They had a voice in whether wars started or ended. Power wasn't concentrated the way Europeans expected. It was distributed, checked, balanced across gender and generation and clan. Step into a typical day in a Cherokee town around the year 1500. You wake before dawn in your mother's house. The fire has burned down to coals overnight, and your grandmother is already coaxing it back to life. She sleeps light, always has. The house smells like wood smoke and dried corn and people, not unpleasant, just lived in, the smell of family. You take a clay pot down to the river to fetch water. The town is always built near water. You never build where you can't reach a river easily. The pot is heavy when it's full. You carry it balanced on your shoulder, the weight distributed, the same way your mother taught you. Back at the house, your mother is already grinding corn, the metatni stone making its rhythmic scraping sound. That sound means breakfast is coming. By the time the sun is fully up, you're in the fields with the other women. The corn is coming in, the beans are climbing, the squash is spreading its broad leaves across the ground. You move through the rows, checking for damage, pulling weeds, harvesting what's ready. It's steady work, but not brutal. There's time to talk, to rest, to watch the children playing at the edge of the field. Wait till your cousin is teaching her daughter the clan stories. The same ones your grandmother taught you, word for word, going back generations. Your aunt sings while she works, an old song about the first corn. The men are off hunting or at the council house discussing something, or maybe just sitting by the river. Gender roles are defined, but not rigid. Everyone knows what needs doing. Everyone contributes what they can. By afternoon, you're done. The food is stored. The next meal is prepared. You have hours before sunset. So you work on a basket, weaving river cane in the pattern your grandmother showed you. Or you visit a friend across town. Or you sit by the river and watch the water flow and think about nothing in particular. This is what prosperity looks like in 1500. Enough food, enough shelter, enough time, community surrounding you. Work that's necessary but not crushing. Leisure that's possible because the systems work. The Cherokee weren't struggling to survive. They'd figured out how to live well, how to organize a society that provided for people without grinding them down, how to balance work and rest, individual and community, peace and the capacity for war when it was needed. They'd been refining this for centuries, perfecting it, passing it down from grandmother to granddaughter, from chief to chief, from generation to generation. And then, in 1540, Spanish men in metal armor came walking through the mountains looking for gold. The world was about to collide with another one. In 1540, Hernando de Soto and his men came through Cherokee territory looking for gold. They didn't find much. They didn't stay long. But they left something behind that would kill more Cherokee than any army ever could. Disease, smallpox, measles, influenza. Diseases that had evolved in Europe over thousands of years in populations living packed together with domesticated animals. Europeans had some immunity. The Cherokee had none. The first epidemics tore through the towns like wildfire. People died so fast, there weren't enough healthy survivors to bury them. Whole villages were wiped out. The population that had numbered perhaps 50,000 or more crashed. Some estimates say they lost half their people in the first century of contact, maybe more. But they didn't collapse. The clan system held, the survivors reorganized, towns consolidated. The matrilineal structure meant that even when fathers died, children still had mothers, aunts, and grandmothers, entire clan networks that absorbed orphans and kept families intact. The system that had seemed like just a way of organizing society turned out to be a survival mechanism. And the Cherokee started adapting, fast. When English traders pushed through the Appalachians in 1673, they found the Cherokee ready to deal. Not as victims, not as primitive people in awe of European technology, as strategic partners who knew exactly what they wanted. Metal tools, iron axes that could fell a tree in an hour instead of a day, steel knives that held an edge, brass kettles that didn't crack like clay pots, guns, loud, inaccurate at first, but game-changing for warfare and hunting. The Cherokee traded deerskins for these goods. Thousands and thousands of deerskins. They hunted deer so intensively that the populations crashed in some areas. It wasn't sustainable. They knew it. But the tools were worth it, the guns especially. Because the Cherokee weren't just dealing with Europeans, they were surrounded by other tribes who were also getting guns. The Creek to the south, the Chickasaw to the west, the Catawba to the east. Everyone was arming up. Everyone was competing for the same trade goods, the same European alliances, the same shrinking territory. Stay isolated and you'd be overrun by neighbors who'd adapted faster. The Cherokee chose to adapt. In 1730, they formalized an alliance with the British Crown. Cherokee leaders traveled to London, across the ocean, to the heart of the empire, and pledged loyalty to King George II. They weren't naive. This was strategy. Britain was the strongest European power in the region. An alliance meant trade goods, military support against rivals, and theoretically, protection of Cherokee land. Theoretically. The British wanted land, always more land, and they had an endless supply of settlers who kept pushing west, ignoring treaties, squatting on Cherokee territory, building cabins and claiming ownership. The Cherokee protested, they negotiated, they signed treaties, 10 major treaties between 1721 and 1777, each one ceding a little more land in exchange for promises that this was the last time, that the new boundary would be permanent, that the settlers would be kept out. The promises never held. More settlers came, more pressure built. The Cherokee fought back sometimes, raids, skirmishes, brief wars. But they also kept negotiating, kept signing treaties, kept believing that if they could just find the right agreement, at the right words on paper, they could secure what was left. They were losing ground, but they were surviving. The population was recovering from the disease crashes, the towns were rebuilding, and Cherokee leaders were learning to navigate the European system, to speak English, to understand colonial law, to play European powers against each other. By the time the American Revolution came, the Cherokee had a choice: side with the British or the American colonists. They chose the British. Another strategic calculation: the British at least pretended to respect boundaries. The American colonists were the ones actually stealing Cherokee land. It didn't work out. The Americans won. And they didn't forget which side the Cherokee had chosen. The new United States had plans for Indian Territory. President Washington and Secretary of War Henry Knox developed a policy they called civilization. The idea was that native peoples should be assimilated, turned into farmers, taught English, converted to Christianity, made to dress and act like white Americans. Do this, and you could stay on your land. Maybe, theoretically. Some Cherokee leaders looked at this offer and saw an opportunity. Not assimilation as surrender, but adaptation as survival. Take the tools that work, learn what's useful, but keep what matters. Christian missionaries arrived in Cherokee territory in the early 1800s. They opened schools. They taught reading and writing in English. They preached Christianity. Some Cherokee converted, many didn't. But they sent their children to the schools anyway, because education meant power in this new world. Cherokee farmers started adopting European agricultural methods: plows, fenced fields, domesticated cattle and hogs. Some became wealthy by American standards, running large farms and trading surplus crops. And yes, some Cherokee began buying enslaved African Americans to work those farms. This is the uncomfortable part. The Cherokee weren't immune to the moral catastrophe of slavery. Some of them participated in it, believing it would prove they were civilized by American standards, that it would protect them from removal. It wouldn't, but they didn't know that yet. By the early 1800s, Cherokee society was split. Traditionalists who wanted to maintain the old ways, who resented the European influence, who saw the changes as losing what made them Cherokee, and progressives who believed adaptation was the only path to survival, who were learning English and Christianity and American farming because the alternative was being swept away. Both groups wanted the same thing: to survive as a people. They just disagreed about how. The traditional council system was still functioning. The clans still mattered. Cherokee was still the dominant language, but European elements were layering on top: schools, churches, roads, new economic systems. Then, someone had an idea that would change everything. If the problem was that Americans didn't respect the Cherokee as civilized, what if the Cherokee proved it beyond any doubt? What if they built a government that looked like the American government? What if they had a written constitution, a legislature, courts, laws? What if they had their own writing system? That's when Sequoyah enters the story. A Cherokee man, middle-aged, literate in no language, who became obsessed with creating a way for Cherokee to write their own words. By the 1820s, he'd done it. Created a syllabary, 85 symbols representing every sound in the Cherokee language. His daughter proved it worked by reading messages he'd written while in another room. The symbols worked. Word spread fast. Suddenly, Cherokee people were teaching each other to read and write. Not in English, in Cherokee. Within months, thousands of people became literate in their own language. It was one of the fastest literacy explosions in human history. And it gave the Cherokee something powerful: a way to preserve their language, their stories, their identity in written form. Even if they adapted everything else, this could survive. The progressives saw their moment. In 1827, the Cherokee Nation adopted a written constitution. They established a two-house legislature, a court system, executive officers. It was modeled on the U.S. Constitution but adapted for Cherokee needs. It protected the communal land ownership, the matrilineal clan system, the traditional rights that mattered. In 1828, they launched the Cherokee Phoenix, a bilingual newspaper printed in both Cherokee and English. It circulated to thousands of readers. It published laws, news, editorials defending Cherokee sovereignty. They built a capital at New Echota with a brick courthouse, a printing press, government buildings. They had schools teaching in both languages. They had stores, roads, farms, everything that defined civilization by American standards. Cherokee literacy rates exceeded those of white Georgians. Cherokee farms were more productive. Cherokee government was more sophisticated than many American states. They'd done it, proven it, become everything America claimed to want. By the 1820s, they faced an existential question. Would adaptation be enough? The Cherokee were about to answer that question in the most remarkable way possible. The Cherokee made a decision in the 1820s that would define the next decade of their existence. They would prove, beyond any possible doubt, that they were civilized, not by American standards imposed on them. By American standards they would exceed. If civilization meant written laws, they'd create a constitution as sophisticated as any state's. If it meant literacy, they'd achieve literacy rates that shamed their white neighbors. If it meant modern government, they'd build one that worked better than most American towns could manage. They would become the model minority, the success story, the proof that Indians could adapt, could progress, could become everything white America claimed to want them to be. And surely, they'd be left alone. The movement started with practical adaptations that were already underway. Cherokee farmers had been adopting European agricultural techniques for decades: plows, fenced fields, livestock. Some Cherokee were wealthy by any standard: large farms, profitable trade, influence that crossed racial lines. Christian missionaries had established schools. Some Cherokee had converted, many hadn't. But they sent their children to learn anyway because education was power in this changing world. And the traditional council system was still operating. The 7 clans, the matrilineal structure, the dual chief system. But there was growing recognition that this might not be enough, that to survive, they needed to speak to America in a language America would understand. Then, Sequoyah completed something that changed everything. He'd been working on it for 12 years, a writing system for the Cherokee language, not an alphabet borrowed from English, not a code, a completely new syllabary, 85 symbols representing every sound in Cherokee. Sequoyah couldn't read English, couldn't write English, but he'd observed that white people had power through talking leaves, marks on paper that carried meaning across distance and time. He became obsessed with creating the same thing for Cherokee. People thought he was crazy. His wife burned his early attempts, thinking he was wasting time on useless scratches. His neighbors mocked him. 12 years of ridicule and failure and starting over. Then, in 1821, he demonstrated it publicly. His daughter Ayoka was in one room, Sequoyah in another. People gave him messages, complex messages, stories, specific details. He wrote them down in his symbols. Ayoka read them perfectly, word for word, without having heard them spoken. It worked. The syllabary spread like wildfire. Within months, thousands of Cherokee were teaching each other to read and write, not in English, in Cherokee. The language they'd been speaking their entire lives could suddenly be preserved on paper. You didn't need years of education to learn it. The system was elegant, logical. Adults were learning it in days. Children were learning it in weeks. A Cherokee person who'd never seen written language before could be literate in their own tongue within a month. This had almost never happened in human history. A few times, Korea's Hangul, the Vai script in Liberia, but vanishingly rare. Usually, writing systems evolved over centuries or were borrowed from other languages. Sequoyah created one from nothing, specifically designed for Cherokee in one man's lifetime. And it gave the Cherokee something precious, a way to preserve their language in written form. Even if everything else changed, this could survive. The progressive Cherokee leaders saw the potential immediately. In 1827, the Cherokee Nation adopted a written constitution, not a translation of the U.S. Constitution, an original document that borrowed the structure but adapted it for Cherokee needs. It established a two-house legislature, a principal chief and assistant principal chief elected by the people, a court system, separation of powers, checks and balances, everything Americans associated with civilized government. But it also protected Cherokee values, communal land ownership. Land belonged to the nation, not to individuals. The matrilineal clan system, traditional rights. It was a hybrid document, American in form, but Cherokee in spirit. John Ross became principal chief. He was perfect for the role. 1/8 Cherokee by blood, but raised in Cherokee culture, fluent in both languages, educated in mission schools, understanding both worlds. He believed absolutely that if the Cherokee proved themselves civilized, America would honor its treaties. In 1828, they launched the Cherokee Phoenix. It was a newspaper. The bilingual, one column in English, one in Cherokee using Sequoyah's syllabary. Printed on a press at New Echota, the Cherokee capital. Distributed to thousands of readers across Cherokee territory and beyond. The editor was Elias Boudinot, educated at a mission school in Connecticut, brilliant, articulate, committed to the civilization project. The Phoenix published Cherokee laws, international news, editorials defending Cherokee sovereignty, poetry, announcements. It looked like any American newspaper except half of it was in symbols most Americans had never seen. White readers were shocked. Indians publishing a newspaper in their own written language, discussing politics and philosophy and current events. It shattered every assumption about Cherokee capacity. The Phoenix became a propaganda tool, yet every issue was proof. Look what we've built. Look what we can do. We're not savages. We're citizens of a modern nation. New Echota itself was designed to impress. The capital had brick buildings, government offices, a courthouse, a print shop, streets laid out in a grid. It looked like an American town because that was the point. Any visitor could see, this is civilization. They built schools. The Cherokee had higher literacy rates than white Georgians. This is an exaggeration, it's documented. Between English literacy from mission schools and Cherokee literacy from the syllabary, more Cherokee could read than their white neighbors. Their government was functioning smoothly. They had written laws, published in both languages. They had courts resolving disputes. They had tax collection, public works, everything a state needed. Their economy was thriving. Cherokee farmers were producing surplus crops. Cherokee merchants were trading successfully. Some Cherokee owned substantial property, large farms, slaves. Yes, some participated in that horror, believing it proved civilization. Businesses. Missionaries were documenting all of this, sending reports back east describing Cherokee progress in glowing terms. The civilization experiment was working. The Cherokee were becoming everything the policy had claimed to want. Religious services were held in Cherokee and English. Children attended schools where they learned both languages. Families mixed traditional practices with Christian ones, going to church on Sunday but maintaining clan obligations, celebrating American holidays, but also the Green Corn Festival. It was genuine adaptation, not abandoning Cherokee identity, but layering new elements on top of it. Taking what was useful from American culture while keeping what mattered from their own. And it seemed to be working. The Cherokee had credibility. They had sympathizers in Congress. They had American lawyers willing to defend them. They had documented proof of civilization that even skeptics couldn't deny. Sequoyah's syllabary was the crown jewel of the whole project. It proved Cherokee intellectual capacity in ways nothing else could. This wasn't borrowed civilization. This was indigenous innovation. A Cherokee man had created something genuinely new, something even white Americans had to admire. The syllabary was being used everywhere. In the newspaper, in personal letters, in church hymnals translated into Cherokee, in legal documents. In school books teaching Cherokee children to read their own language, it meant Cherokee could be preserved even as everything else modernized. You could adopt American government, American agriculture, American religion, but the language could stay alive, written and spoken, passed down to children who would read it in books instead of just hearing it from elders. By the late 1820s, the Cherokee could point to themselves as proof that the civilization policy worked. They had everything America claimed to value: written language, constitutional government, Christian religion, agricultural economy, education, literacy, law and order. They'd done it. They'd transformed themselves in a single generation from a traditional tribal society to a modern nation that could stand beside any American state. They'd proven that savage and civilized had nothing to do with race and everything to do with opportunity and choice. That, given the chance and the motivation, indigenous people could adapt, could innovate, could excel. Surely this was enough. Surely now the pressure would ease. Surely the United States would recognize what the Cherokee had accomplished and honor the treaties that promised them peace. They had become everything America claimed to want. Then, someone found gold. In 1828, a man found gold on Cherokee land in northern Georgia. Within weeks, thousands of prospectors were pouring into Cherokee territory. They didn't ask permission. They didn't wait for treaties. They just came, staking claims, building camps, tearing up the land, looking for gold that wasn't theirs on land that wasn't theirs. The state of Georgia saw an opportunity. Georgia had always resented the Cherokee presence. Here was sovereign Indian territory carved out of what Georgia considered its state land. Here were people who refused to leave, who had their own government, their own laws. And now there was gold underneath them. In December 1828, Georgia passed a law declaring that all Cherokee laws were void. Every treaty the Cherokee had signed, every promise the United States had made, Georgia said none of it mattered. Cherokee land was now Georgia land, open for settlement and mining. Cherokee government had no authority. Cherokee people had no rights. The Cherokee weren't naive. They'd seen this coming. They'd spent years preparing for exactly this scenario, building their legal case, documenting their sovereignty, as establishing their government precisely so they'd have standing to fight in American courts. John Ross, the principal chief, was a strategic thinker. Educated, fluent in English, married to a Cherokee woman from a prominent clan, respected by both traditionalists and progressives. He believed the American legal system would work if the Cherokee presented the right arguments. So, they hired lawyers, good ones, and they took Georgia to court. The first case, Cherokee Nation versus Georgia in 1831, was a partial victory. Chief Justice John Marshall ruled that Indian tribes were domestic dependent nations, not fully foreign, but not fully under state control either. It wasn't the full recognition the Cherokee wanted, but it established that they had special status. Then came the case that should have settled everything. Samuel Worcester was a white missionary living in Cherokee territory. Georgia arrested him for refusing to swear an oath to the state and get a license to live on Georgia land. Worcester said Georgia had no authority over Cherokee territory. Georgia said it had every authority. Worcester's lawyers argued that the Cherokee were a sovereign nation, that their treaties with the federal government were supreme law, and that Georgia had no right to extend its laws over Cherokee land. The case went to the Supreme Court. Worcester versus Georgia, 1832, and the Cherokee won. Not a partial victory, a complete, unambiguous win. Chief Justice Marshall's ruling was explicit. The Cherokee Nation was a sovereign entity. Their treaties with the United States were binding. Georgia's laws had no force in Cherokee territory. Worcester and the other missionaries had to be released immediately. It was the highest legal victory possible. The Supreme Court of the United States had ruled in favor of Cherokee sovereignty. The Cherokee celebrated. They'd played by American rules and won. They'd proven their case in the highest court in the land. Surely now the law would be enforced. Surely now Georgia would back down. Surely President Andrew Jackson would uphold the Supreme Court's decision. Jackson did nothing. There's a famous quote, probably apocryphal, but capturing the spirit of what happened. John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. The Supreme Court has no army. It has no enforcement mechanism. It depends on the executive branch to carry out its rulings. And Jackson, who'd built his reputation fighting Indians, who'd made his position on Indian removal abundantly clear, simply refused. Georgia ignored the ruling completely. Worcester stayed in prison. Georgia's laws stayed in effect. The gold rush continued. Settlers kept pouring in, stealing Cherokee land, burning Cherokee homes, claiming Cherokee farms as their own. And there was nothing the Cherokee could do about it. This was the moment the facade cracked, the moment it became clear that all the adaptation, all the civilization, all the legal victories didn't matter. The law only works when someone enforces it. And the people with the power to enforce it had already decided they wanted the Cherokee gone. But it got worse. The Indian Removal Act had already passed in 1830, narrowly by a single vote in the Senate. It authorized the president to negotiate treaties exchanging Indian land in the east for territory west of the Mississippi. The Cherokee had protested it. They'd sent delegations to Washington. They'd lobbied. They'd published editorials in the Cherokee Phoenix explaining why removal was unjust, illegal, unconscionable. None of it mattered. Jackson wanted removal. Georgia wanted the land. The settlers wanted the gold. And the Supreme Court decision, for all its moral clarity, had no force behind it. The pressure intensified. Georgia held lotteries, distributing Cherokee land to white citizens who'd never set foot on it. Cherokee families came home to find strangers living in their houses, claiming legal ownership under Georgia law. The Georgia Guard, a militia created specifically to harass the Cherokee, arrested Cherokee leaders. They confiscated property, broke up gatherings. The violence was constant. The message was clear: leave or be destroyed. Most Cherokee refused. They held firm. This was their land. They had legal right. They had Supreme Court backing. They would not go. But a small faction saw the writing on the wall. Major Ridge had been a warrior, a leader, a man who'd fought for the Cherokee his whole life. His son, John Ridge, had been educated in mission schools, spoke perfect English, understood American politics. Elias Boudinot had been the editor of the Cherokee Phoenix, a voice for Cherokee sovereignty. These men looked at the situation and reached a terrible conclusion. Removal was inevitable. The United States had the power, and it would use that power whether the Cherokee consented or not. It better to negotiate the best terms possible than to be driven out with nothing. In December 1835, this faction, maybe 20 men total, representing perhaps 500 Cherokee out of 16,000, met at New Echota and signed a treaty with the United States. The Treaty of New Echota exchanged all remaining Cherokee land east of the Mississippi for $5 million, land in Indian Territory, Oklahoma, and provisions for the journey west. The treaty gave the Cherokee 2 years to leave voluntarily. After that, they'd be removed by force. The vast majority of Cherokee were furious. This wasn't their government. These men had no authority to sign away the nation's land. John Ross immediately organized a petition. 16,000 Cherokee signed it, nearly every adult in the nation, rejecting the treaty and asserting that it didn't represent their will, or didn't matter. The U.S. Senate ratified the treaty anyway, by one vote. One single vote was the difference between ratification and rejection. President Jackson signed it immediately. The deadline was set, May 1838. Leave voluntarily or be removed by force. John Ross kept fighting. He sent delegations to Washington. He lobbied congressmen. He published appeals to the American people. He presented the petition with 16,000 signatures, proving the treaty was a fraud. The deadline approached. Most Cherokee stayed. They'd done everything right. They'd built a civilization. They'd won in court. They'd proven their case in every possible way. And they believed, against all evidence, but they believed that justice would prevail. In May 1838, 7,000 U.S. soldiers arrived in Cherokee territory with orders to remove the Cherokee by force. And everything the Cherokee had built, the government, the legal arguments, the schools, the newspapers, the farms, the careful adaptation to American standards, none of it had been enough. The soldiers were coming. The soldiers come in early summer. You're in your house, your mother's house, the one that's belonged to your clan for generations, when you hear the commotion outside, shouting, dogs barking, the sound of horses and boots and metal. A soldier appears in the doorway. He doesn't speak Cherokee. He doesn't need to. The bayonet makes his meaning clear. You have minutes, maybe less. Grab what you can carry and get outside. Your mother reaches for the cooking pot still warm from breakfast. Your grandmother grabs a blanket. Your sister scoops up her baby. Now you look around wildly. What do you take when you have seconds to leave everything you've ever known? You grab a book, one of the Cherokee language books from the Phoenix printing press. You don't even think about it. Your hands just move. Outside, soldiers are herding people into groups, families trying to stay together, old people being pushed along, children crying. The town you've lived in your whole life is being emptied in minutes. Someone's house is already on fire. You don't know if the owners did it themselves, better to burn it than leave it for thieves, or if looters are already moving in behind the soldiers. You can see them. White settlers following the military, pointing at houses, claiming what they want. Your neighbor's farm, the council house, everything. The soldiers march you to a stockade, a temporary fort they've built, surrounded by wooden walls. Hundreds of Cherokee are already there, more arriving every hour. The stockade is overcrowded from day one. Not enough shelter, not enough clean water, not enough food. Families huddle together in whatever space they can find. The heat is oppressive. It's June, and you're packed in with hundreds of people, and the smell is already bad. Disease starts almost immediately. Dysentery first, then whooping cough, then measles spreading through the children. Your grandmother gets sick within a week. She's strong, she's always been strong, but she's old, and the conditions are brutal. You try to keep her comfortable. You share your water ration. You sit with her at night when the fever spikes. She dies in July, in a stockade, on dirt, surrounded by strangers and guards instead of her clan. You bury her in a mass grave outside the stockade walls. No ceremony, no proper mourning, no time. The soldiers say you'll move west when it cools down, but families are dying in the stockades, so some groups leave in the summer heat anyway. You hear they're dying on the trail too, the heat, the drought, the disease following them. John Ross negotiates for the Cherokee to organize their own removal in the fall, to lead themselves rather than be driven by soldiers. It's a small dignity, but it's something. October finally comes. Cool weather, time to move. You're organized into groups of about 1,000 people each, 13 groups total, leaving weeks apart. Wagons for those who can afford them, horses for some, most people walking. You start west. The first days aren't terrible. You're weak from months in the stockade, but you're moving. You're with your family, what's left of it. Your mother, your sister and her baby, your uncle who survived the summer, your clan members from other towns. You find each other and stick together. The road is crowded. White settlers traveling the same routes, sometimes jeering, sometimes just staring. Towns that don't want you stopping, ferries that charge outrageous prices to cross rivers because they know you have no choice. You walk 15 miles a day when the road is good, 10 when it's not, 5 when someone is sick, or the wagons break down, or the weather is impossible. November brings cold, then December brings worse. Snow and ice and temperatures that drop below freezing night after night. You're not dressed for this. You left in summer. The clothes you grabbed were summer clothes. Some people have blankets, some don't. The government was supposed to provide supplies. Sometimes they do, often they don't. Your nephew dies in November. 4 years old, a cold that turned into something worse. His mother, your sister, wraps him in the blanket your grandmother grabbed on the day of removal. They bury him beside the trail in Missouri. You don't even know what town you're near. Your sister doesn't speak for 3 days after. But people help each other. That's what keeps you going. When someone collapses, others carry them. When a family runs out of food, others share what they have, even though no one has enough. When children are orphaned, and children are orphaned constantly, other families take them in. The clan obligations hold even here, even on this trail, even when everyone is dying. You meet a woman from a different group at a river crossing. She's Wolf Clan, like you. You've never seen her before. She gives you cornmeal from her ration, because clan takes care of clan. You give her sister a blanket because your nephew doesn't need it anymore. Some people still have seeds, hidden in pockets, sewn into hems, carried in pouches around their necks, seeds from their gardens back home, corn, beans, squash. The three sisters, they protect these seeds like treasure because when you get west, you'll need to plant. You'll need to start over. Some people have books, Cherokee language books, slim and precious, wrapped in cloth to keep them dry. The syllabary traveling west, because even if everything else is lost, the language can survive. The elders teach the children clan stories while walking. The same stories their grandmothers taught them, word for word. If the children remember, the stories survive. Your mother teaches you a song you've never heard before, an old song, she says. Her grandmother taught her, about the mountains, about home, about the people who came before. You walk and sing it quietly. Other women join in. The song has probably been sung for 100 years, maybe more. It might be sung for 100 more if you remember it. You cross the Mississippi on a ferry in freezing rain. The far bank is Indian territory, nearly there now, but the worst is still coming. January is brutal, the coldest winter in years, people say. Blizzards, ice storms, days when you can't travel, just huddle together trying to stay warm while your supplies run out. Your uncle dies in January, pneumonia. He's buried in Arkansas. Another grave beside the trail. You've lost count of how many you've passed. Sometimes you walk past graves that are fresh, other Cherokee groups ahead of you, leaving their dead along the way. Sometimes you see people you knew. Sometimes you don't look. But you also see people helping strangers. A farmer who lets you camp in his barn instead of in the snow. A town that donates food instead of turning you away. White people aren't a monolith. Some are cruel. Some are indifferent. Some are kind in ways that save lives. You hold on to those moments. March 1839. You arrive in Indian Territory. You've walked over 1,000 miles. It took 5 months. Of the roughly 16,000 Cherokee who started, over 4,000 are dead, maybe more. The count isn't exact because people died in stockades before the journey even started. People died on the trail and were buried quickly. People died after arriving, their bodies finally giving out. Your group started with about 1,000 people. You arrive with maybe 700, but you arrive. You stand on new land, unfamiliar land, land that's supposed to be yours now, though you never wanted it, though it cost everything you had. Your mother is still alive. Your sister is still alive, though she's carrying grief that will never leave. You're alive. Some of your clan made it. Some of your town made it. You still have the book you grabbed. Your mother still knows the song. Your sister still has the seeds sewn into her dress hem. You've lost your grandmother, your nephew, your uncle, your home, your town, the mountains you grew up in, the graves of your ancestors, everything that made a place home. But you still have each other. You still have your language. You still have your clans, your identity, your stories. The question hovering over everything, unspoken but present. Is that enough? Can you rebuild from this? Can anything survive what you've just endured? You don't have an answer yet, but you're alive, and that's where you start. You arrive in Indian Territory to find Cherokee people already living there. The old settlers. Cherokee who'd moved west voluntarily back in 1817, trading their eastern land for territory in Arkansas, then moving again to Oklahoma. They'd been here for over 20 years. They'd built towns, established farms, created their own government based on traditional Cherokee law. And they're not happy to see 16,000 exhausted refugees showing up expecting to take over. There are also survivors from the Treaty Party, the faction that signed the removal treaty. The ones who came west in 1837 and 1838 voluntarily before the forced removal. They have their own ideas about how the unified Cherokee Nation should be governed. 3 groups, 3 governments, 3 visions for the future, and none of them trusting the others. The National Party, John Ross's people, the ones who were forced west, are the largest group by far. They want to establish the constitutional government they'd built in the East, the Constitution, the legislative system, the courts. The old settlers say no. They were here first. Their government was working fine. Why should they abandon their system because a bunch of newcomers arrived? The Treaty Party is caught in the middle, but leaning toward the old settlers' approach. The tensions build through the spring of 1839. Meetings are held. Arguments go in circles. No one can agree on basic questions of authority. Then, on June 22, 1839, 3 men are killed. Major Ridge, John Ridge, Elias Boudinot, the leaders of the Treaty Party, the men who'd signed the removal treaty. They're killed in coordinated attacks the same morning in different locations. Major Ridge is shot while riding on a road in Arkansas. John Ridge is dragged from his bed and stabbed to death in front of his family. Elias Boudinot is lured away from his house and killed with tomahawks. The executions were organized by members of the National Party. They saw it as justice under Cherokee law. The penalty for selling the nation's land without authorization was death. The law was clear. These men had violated it. The punishment was carried out. The Treaty Party and many old settlers saw it as murder, political assassination, the beginning of a purge. Indian territory nearly explodes into civil war. Armed groups form, raids, counter-raids, assassinations, families torn apart by factional loyalty, Cherokee killing Cherokee while they're supposed to be rebuilding from catastrophe. It's Sequoyah who helps pull them back from the edge. He's an old settler. He came west in 1828, long before removal. He's in his 70s now, working on a project to visit other tribes and spread the syllabary, to create a universal writing system for all native peoples. But he returns when he hears about the violence, and he brings moral authority that transcends factions. He created the thing that lets them all communicate. He gave them a tool that's keeping the language alive even as everything else falls apart. People listen to him. He doesn't solve everything, but he helps broker conversations, helps find common ground, reminds people that Cherokee killing Cherokee is exactly what their enemies want. Slowly, painfully, agreements are reached. In June 1839, the same month as the killings, representatives from all 3 groups meet at the Illinois campground. They sign an act of union. Not everyone is happy, not everyone agrees, but most Cherokee leaders accept it. They'll unite under one government. In September, they ratify a new constitution. It's based on the 1827 Eastern Constitution, but adapted for the Western situation. It protects communal land ownership. It maintains the clan system. It creates a government that looks American on the surface, but keeps Cherokee values underneath. John Ross is elected principal chief. An old settler leader becomes second chief. The government includes representatives from all factions. It's fragile. Violence continues sporadically for years, but the foundation is laid, and they start rebuilding. New towns go up. New farms are cleared. The Cherokee who've been wealthy in the East have to start over from nothing. The ones who've been poor have the same chance as everyone else now. It's a strange kind of equality born from shared loss. Schools open. The Cherokee Male Seminary and Cherokee Female Seminary are established in 1851. Advanced boarding schools offering education that rivals anything available to white students. They're teaching in English, yes, but Cherokee language and history are part of the curriculum. The syllabary spreads. Even people who can't read English can read Cherokee. Literacy rates climb. Letters travel between separated families. The Cherokee Advocate newspaper starts publishing in 1844, like the Phoenix, bilingual, keeping people informed and connected. The language is the thread holding them together. When factions can't agree on governance, they can still read the same words. When old settlers and new arrivals don't trust each other politically, they can still share the same stories in the same script. Sequoyah dies in 1843, somewhere in Mexico, still searching for Cherokee bands rumored to have migrated there generations ago. He's trying to unite scattered Cherokee groups through the syllabary until the end. He never sees how completely his creation becomes the glue holding the nation together. By the 1850s, the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma is thriving. Prosperous farms, successful businesses, a functioning government, they've rebuilt. Then, the Civil War tears them apart again. The Confederacy courts the Cherokee hard. They're in Confederate territory. They have slavery. Some Cherokee own slaves. The Confederacy promises to respect Cherokee sovereignty, to honor treaties in ways the Union never has. The Union offers nothing concrete and has a terrible track record of broken promises. Stand Watie, a treaty party leader, forms a Cherokee regiment for the Confederacy. John Ross tries to keep the Cherokee neutral, then reluctantly signs a treaty with the Confederacy when it seems like the only option. But many Cherokee support the Union. The nation splits. Cherokee fight Cherokee again, this time on opposite sides of the American Civil War. The war is devastating. Crops burned, towns destroyed, families divided. When it ends in 1865, the Cherokee Nation is in ruins again, and the United States punishes them for Confederate alliance. The Treaty of 1866 forces the Cherokee to abolish slavery, which they do. The freed slaves become Cherokee citizens with full rights, voting, land ownership, everything. It's more progressive than what's happening in the former Confederate states, but the treaty also takes the western half of Cherokee territory as punishment. Millions of acres gone. Still, they rebuild. Again. Late 1800s, another golden age. The Cherokee Nation is functioning smoothly. The government is sophisticated. The schools are excellent. The economy is growing. They've proven for the third time that they can build something from destruction. Then comes the Dawes Act. In 1887, the U.S. government decides that communal tribal land ownership is holding Native peoples back. The solution? Break up tribal lands into individual allotments, give each family a parcel, declare them private property owners, make them Americans like everyone else. The Cherokee fight it. They know what this means. Individual plots can be sold, swindled, lost. Communal ownership is protection. Privatization is vulnerability. Doesn't matter. The law passes anyway. Cherokee land is surveyed, divided, allotted. Millions of acres of surplus land, the portions not assigned to individual Cherokee, are opened to white settlement. Settlers pour in. In 1907, Oklahoma becomes a state. The Cherokee Nation government is dissolved by federal order. The courts are abolished. The tribal authority is ended. For the third time, the Cherokee have to figure out how to preserve themselves when the structure around them is destroyed. But this time is different. This time, there's no new territory to move to. No option to rebuild a government somewhere else. This time, the preservation has to happen quietly, in homes, in families, in communities that keep meeting even when there's no official nation to belong to. The syllabary stays alive because grandmothers keep teaching it. The stories stay alive because parents keep telling them. The clan obligations stay alive because people keep honoring them even when the government that formalized them is gone. For 63 years, the Cherokee have no elected government. Chiefs are appointed by U.S. presidents. The people have no say, but they're still Cherokee, still speaking the language, still passing down what matters, waiting for the chance to rebuild again. For 63 years, the Cherokee Nation doesn't officially exist. From 1907 to 1970, there's no elected government, no tribal authority, no legal structure for the Cherokee to govern themselves. Chiefs are appointed by U.S. presidents, men chosen by Washington, not by the Cherokee people. This is supposed to be the final assimilation. Make them individual landowners. Make them Oklahoma citizens. Wait a generation or two, and Cherokee becomes just an ancestry line on a family tree, not a living identity. But the dissolution of government doesn't dissolve the people. In homes across Oklahoma and North Carolina, yet grandmothers keep teaching Cherokee to their grandchildren. Not in schools. Speaking Cherokee in schools is often forbidden, punished. But at home, in kitchens, in quiet moments, the language keeps passing down. The syllabary moves through families like a secret code. Children learn to read it from worn books their parents hide. The symbols Sequoyah created stay alive in handwritten letters, in notes tucked into Bibles, in primers copied by hand when printed versions become scarce. Communities keep gathering, not official tribal meetings, those are illegal. But family reunions, church services, social events that happen to involve only Cherokee people, where the language is spoken freely, where the old stories get told, where clan relationships are maintained through the simple act of remembering who belongs to whom. The green corn ceremony continues in some communities, not publicly, not with the formal structure of the old days. But the core ritual survives, giving thanks, renewing relationships, marking the seasons. The sacred fire tradition stays lit, sometimes literally, in families that maintain it across generations. Traditional medicine knowledge passes from healers to apprentices. Basket weaving techniques survive through the hands that keep practicing them. Pottery methods persist because someone keeps making the same patterns their grandmother made. It's preservation through practice, through stubbornness, through the quiet insistence that being Cherokee means something more than a notation on a government document. And then things start to shift. The 1960s civil rights movement creates space for Native activism. Indians across the country are organizing, demanding recognition, pushing back against termination policies. The political climate is changing. In 1970, Congress passes the Principal Chiefs Act. It's a simple law. The Cherokee can elect their own leaders again. For the first time in 63 years, Cherokee people vote for their own chief. The government can rebuild. W. Keeler becomes the first elected principal chief of the modern era. Then Ross Swimmer. Then Wilma Mankiller, the first woman elected principal chief, serving from 1985 to 1995, overseeing massive growth in tribal services and infrastructure. The Cherokee Nation rebuilds its government from the ground up. Again. For what, the fourth time? Fifth? They've lost count. But this time, they're building in a new context. The U.S. It has shifted from termination policy to self-determination. Tribes can govern themselves, run their own programs, make their own decisions within the framework of federal law. The Cherokee Nation takes full advantage. They establish healthcare systems, clinics, hospitals, wellness programs serving Cherokee citizens. They build housing programs. They create job training. They develop economic enterprises, businesses that generate revenue to fund services. The tribe becomes one of the largest employers in northeastern Oklahoma. They're running sophisticated operations, manufacturing, hospitality, retail, gaming. The revenue funds education programs, elder care, language preservation, cultural initiatives. Today, the Cherokee Nation has over 370,000 enrolled citizens. It's one of the largest tribes in the United States. The government is massive, departments, programs, services that would make a small state envious. But there are actually 3 federally recognized Cherokee tribes now. The Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, the largest, the descendants of those who walked the Trail of Tears and those who'd moved west earlier. the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in North Carolina, descendants of the 1,000 or so Cherokee who hid in the mountains during removal, who never left, who bought land and stayed and rebuilt in the homeland. They're smaller, about 16,000 enrolled members, but they've maintained continuous presence in the original Cherokee territory. The United Kituah Band in Oklahoma, focused on preserving traditional Cherokee culture and religion, federally recognized separately, maintaining their own government. 3 tribes, 1 people. Different histories converging in the present, and the language is the thing they're all fighting to preserve. By the late 1900s, Cherokee was dying. Most fluent speakers were elders. Young people were learning English, assimilating, losing the language that had survived everything else. Estimates said fewer than 10,000 fluent speakers remained, most over age 50. If the language died, something fundamental died with it. Not just words, worldview, stories that don't translate, concepts that only exist in Cherokee. The direct connection to ancestors who'd preserved this through removal, through dissolution, through generations of pressure to abandon it. So the Cherokee Nation made language revitalization a priority. They opened Cherokee immersion schools where children learn all subjects in Cherokee from kindergarten onward. The schools use Sequoyah's syllabary, the same symbols created 200 years ago, teaching kids to read and write in the language before they learn English. They developed language apps, online courses, resources for adults trying to relearn what their grandparents spoke, but their parents were afraid to teach. They trained new speakers, held language camps, created master-apprentice programs, pairing elders with young people committed to achieving fluency. It's working, slowly. The number of speakers is growing for the first time in generations. Children are learning Cherokee as their first language again. The syllabary is being used actively by a new generation. You can walk into a Cherokee immersion school today and see 5-year-olds writing in the same script Sequoyah invented, or reading stories in the same language their ancestors spoke while being driven from their homes, speaking words that have survived 200 years of pressure to disappear. The cultural centers preserve and display Cherokee history. Museums document what was lost and what survived. Archives hold letters written in Cherokee, newspapers printed in the syllabary, documents proving continuous existence even when the government said the nation was dissolved. The Eastern Band runs Oconaluftee Indian Village in North Carolina, a living history site where Cherokee people demonstrate traditional crafts, tell traditional stories, keep alive the practices that predate removal. The Cherokee Nation runs cultural programs teaching traditional arts, pottery, basket weaving, beadwork. Not as museum pieces, but as living practices passed from master to student. The clans still matter. People still know which clan they belong to, still honor those obligations, still maintain those connections. The matrilineal tradition continues in many families. The story the Cherokee tell about themselves has changed. It's not the story of vanished Indians from textbooks. It's not the tragic tale of removal and ending. It's a story of adaptation, of preserving what matters while changing what's necessary, of rebuilding over and over from loss that should have been final. It's a story that's still being written. Every child learning Cherokee in an immersion school is writing it. Every family maintaining clan traditions is writing it. Every Cherokee citizen participating in tribal government is writing it. The story continues because the people continue. There's a classroom in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, the capital of the Cherokee Nation. A teacher stands at the front, writing on the board, not in English, in Cherokee. The symbols flow across the whiteboard, Tsalagi Gawani Hizdi, Cherokee language. The children, 6-7 years old, copy the symbols into their notebooks. They sound out the syllables. They read sentences to each other. They're learning math in Cherokee, science in Cherokee, history in their own language. One little girl is writing her name. The symbols come slowly, carefully. Her tongue sticks out slightly in concentration, the way kids' tongues do when they're focused. She finishes, holds up her paper proudly. Her grandmother is visiting today, sitting in the back of the classroom, watching. There are tears on her face. She learned Cherokee in secret, whispered lessons from her own grandmother, hidden from teachers who would have punished her for speaking it. She raised her children during the years when Cherokee felt like something dying, when speaking it seemed like clinging to the past instead of preparing for the future. She didn't teach them. She regrets that now. But her granddaughter is learning, openly, proudly, in a school run by Cherokee people, teaching Cherokee language, preserving what almost died. The symbols the little girl is writing are the same ones Sequoyah created in 1821 when he decided his people needed a way to preserve their words. The same syllabary that spread like wildfire through the Cherokee Nation. The same writing system that traveled west on the Trail of Tears, carried in books and memories. The same symbols that passed quietly through families during the 63 years when Cherokee government didn't exist. 200 years, the line is unbroken. This is what the Cherokee story teaches. It's not a story about noble savages living in harmony until civilization destroyed them. It's not a story about inevitable decline and tragic ending. It's a story about human ingenuity in the face of impossible pressure. Sequoyah creating a writing system because his people needed one. Cherokee leaders building a constitutional government because adaptation was survival. Families hiding seeds in their pockets during forced removal because they knew they'd need to plant again. Grandmothers teaching language in secret because some things can't be allowed to die. It's a story about making strategic choices when all the options are bad. About knowing what's worth preserving and what can be let go. About changing enough to survive without losing what makes you who you are. The Cherokee adopted European technology. They built American-style governments. They learned English, converted to Christianity, participated in American economics. They changed enormously over 200 years. But they stayed Cherokee. They kept the language, kept the clans, kept the stories, kept the identity that mattered more than any government structure or economic system. They survived smallpox that killed half their population. They survived forced removal that killed a quarter of what remained. They survived the dissolution of their government, the theft of their land, the systematic attempt to assimilate them out of existence. And they're still here, not as a remnant, not as a dying culture preserved in museums, as living nations with hundreds of thousands of citizens, functioning governments, thriving communities, and a language that's being spoken by children who represent its future. The story didn't end on the Trail of Tears. It didn't end in 1907 when Oklahoma statehood dissolved their government. It didn't end during the decades of forced assimilation. It hasn't ended. That little girl in Tahlequah will grow up speaking Cherokee. She'll teach her children if she chooses. The language will continue. The nation will continue. The identity will continue. Because the Cherokee figured out something fundamental. Cultures survive not by refusing all change, but by adapting strategically while protecting what's essential. They've been doing it for 200 years since contact. They'll keep doing it for the next 200. This is Cherokee history, not a tragedy with a sad ending. A story of resilience, ingenuity, and survival that continues today. The little girl finishes her lesson. She reads a sentence to her grandmother in fluent Cherokee. Her grandmother answers in the same language. The conversation could have happened 200 years ago. It's happening now. The story continues.